Welcome back to the Neuroscience Meets Social and Emotional Learning podcast for episode number 142 with Michal Ricca, the founder of Now I Can Read, who created an online literacy program called Readify Learning for children aged 10 to 17 who struggle with literacy. We know from our past episode number 136 with Lois Letchford with her dyslexic son, who went on to graduate with his Ph.D. from Oxford University, that some children need different learning strategies than how they're being taught traditionally in the classroom. Michal's program focuses on the critical life skills of verbal and written language and communication with the backbone of social and emotional skills to help propel these students to excel both inside and outside of the classroom. Michal has a powerful story to open up some ideas and strategies if you're a teacher in the classroom or if you're a parent with a struggling reader at home. For those looking for ideas for the workplace, Michal has a compelling story that she'll share on how she took all of her programs online, maximizing her time and efforts with her students and giving her more balance back in her life. I'm Andrea Samadi, author and educator from Toronto, Canada, now living in the United States, and like many of our listeners, have been fascinated with learning and understanding the science behind high-performance strategies in our schools, sports, and the workplace. If you've been listening to our podcast, you'll know that we've uncovered that if we want to improve our social and emotional skills and experience success in our work and personal lives, it all begins with an understanding of our brain. Now, this brings us to our next guest. When I first met Michal through LinkedIn, I knew right away that she had created something unique. And it was when I heard that she'd been focused on helping struggling students to learn how to read for the past 20 years and has helped over 1,000 students learn how to read. If you've ever worked with just one struggling reader, you'll know that it takes someone extremely special to uncover exactly what each student needs. And Michal has this gift. Here's a bit about Michal. Michal Ricca founded the Academic Associates Center in Williston, Vermont in 2008. She holds an advanced teaching Master's of Education from Northwestern University, a bachelor's degree in elementary and special education, and has over 20 years experience working with students with all types of learning styles and differences. She pulls from many sources to individualize instruction, but her foundation is the Orton-Gillingham technique. Her program is a multisensory and enables students by using direct instruction to review, learn new concepts, practice, and then apply what they're learning. Orton-Gillingham has been utilized for over 50 years, is multisensory, systematic, structured, sequential, cumulative, and success-oriented. Research states that the effectiveness of quality literacy instruction has less to do with the program used and more to do with the efficacy of the teacher and the intensiveness of the student's engagement. Let's meet Michal Ricca and see what strategies she can bring to light after 20 years of focused work in the field of literacy and social and emotional learning. Welcome, Michal. It's wonderful to have this opportunity to speak with you here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story that I know will spark some new ideas for those listening who might be working with students who are struggling readers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, Michal, when we first met through LinkedIn, something caught my attention about your work with students, and it was the fact that you've been focused on one thing for over 20 years, and that's to help struggling students learn how to read. And for the past 2 decades, you've taught over 1,000 students how to read without the need for repeat instruction. That's phenomenal. And what was it that inspired you to pick reading for your life's work, and what kept you on this subject for the past 20 years?
Well, first of all, thank you for pointing that out because I sometimes I forget, that I'm that old, number one, and that it is a huge accomplishment, right? To be doing something that you love for that long. I think when I think about my teenage boys now, I wonder how many different careers they'll have. But yeah, no, I still really do love what I do. And I think, I always knew from a really young age that I wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't know in what capacity. But when I first started, I started as a volunteer, actually, even though I had an elementary and a special ed degree. I went into something called Inner City Teaching Corps, which was a volunteer program for 2 years. And I had 42 second graders on the inner city of Chicago, and quickly learned classroom management, and learned how to do it well, but made some of my most dearest and lifelong friends there. And then afterwards, I guess, I kind of at the time looked at it as selling out, but I sold out to the white suburbs of Chicago, and taught 16 first graders. So that was quite a difference with numbers. But no matter what, at the end of each year, I realized I still felt like I didn't have enough minutes. And I had a special ed degree, and I still didn't feel like I really knew how to teach a child how to read. I just did a podcast with Dr. Noland of Learning Ally, and she was saying that there's statistics out there that says that 11% of teachers feel prepared to teach a child how to read. Yeah. 11. So I think it's there's a lot of shame that comes alongside that, because as a teacher, you're supposed to feel like you know what you're doing. You're supposed to feel like a leader, and that you've got it figured out. But we don't. We're really not prepared. We don't have the right systems in place, and it's improving, but it's not where it needs to be. And so that after that year, I did a deep dive into Orton Gillingham instruction, and did week long and month long and retreats and professional developments with really understanding what structured literacy was. And after I worked with 5 of my students in a one-on-one setting, and I saw the progress that happened in that really structured small setting, I kind of never looked back.
Oh my goodness, I love it. You're speaking my language, because, going into the classroom, I wasn't prepared for the behavior, let alone teaching the content.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned both those things. How are we supposed to get to the content if we can't manage the students?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where I got stuck, for sure. And I know that that as the years went on, I saw that there's still not a lot of focus on that until they started to bring social and emotional more to the forefront of the importance of classroom management, making sure the students' relationships are important, seeing the students, who they are, before we can even get to the content. There's so much more that has to happen. So I love that you brought that up.
It's so true. I used to have a Post-it note on my mirror when I was teaching in the inner city that said, "They are just little kids." Because if I look back, I think I was terrified. I was so scared. And classroom management, and there were 42 of them, and behavior, like you said, and yeah, it was terrifying. And it is a like, you either pick it up or you don't.
It's so true. And then what's crazy is that with that teaching background, then you become a parent, and I still didn't know what to do when my daughter was struggling to read.
Right. Yeah, you think you're supposed to know, right?
A whole other cycle. It's like we've got all these tools and resources, and my husband and I are both in education. He has access to all these online programs. You probably have heard of them all.
Yeah.
And we still were like, well, it's not working, because doing more of the same. Let's sit, and I talked about this in some of the interviews I've had. Sit down and read more is not the answer, right?
Yeah. And you're right. My husband and I both experienced the same thing, where you would think that it prepared us for parenthood in a way better than, going to college and getting, an engineering degree. But no, we still are constantly learning, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, I read something on your website that any teacher can pick up in a heartbeat. And it was that the art of teaching can't be taught. Instead, it's often the result of a natural gift that's been fostered by continuous study. Can we talk about that a bit? Like, we've all had those teachers with that quality, and they instilled the love of learning in us. And I saw it in my interview with Lois Letchford. Her son failed first grade, and she figured out what his switch was that helped him to go from a dyslexic student to graduating with his PhD from Oxford. And she found it through his love of learning these explorers through maps. But what inspired your love for the subject? There's got to be more to this. Why do you think you've got something that other people never get to?
Yeah, I actually really love this question because it was actually the topic of my thesis when I was at Northwestern, because I really wanted to know if, is that art of teaching something that can be taught or not? And Dr. Moats is one of my heroes, and she says highly qualified teachers, not programs, teach students to read. And that's not to say that the teachers don't have to be highly qualified in what they've studied, and that their practice should be research based. But I think that how to motivate each child and understanding what motivates someone is truly instinctive. And um, that's more of an instinctual feeling based on whether or not you can access that part of who you are, than it is about a science. And I think um well, what I learned through my thesis is that you can't teach it. You really do either have that access to the instinctual part of you that can really see what a child needs, and like you said before, it is all about connection and relationship. And um, even if you have all of the training in the world and systematically how to teach a child how to read, you still need to know how to slow down and how to speed up, and when to push harder and when to back off, and when to just chat about how their soccer game went, and when it's time to really hone in on a skill. And I think um, that art of teaching is just as important, if not more important, than the science of teaching.
Definitely. And I started to see that when I started to implement how the brain learns to read with some of the books I was reading, the interviews I was doing. I started sitting with my daughter, and instead of saying, okay, let's read together, which was what I used to do, let's read page, see how much we can read in 20 minutes. And I'd be looking at her, and the slowing down part was hard because, you want to push, 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 rush, 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 get everything in because it's going to be dinner time and we got to get off to practice and all this stuff. But I remember sitting there and slowing down and thinking, what's her brain doing right now? As I'm thinking about how is her brain processing the words? That was like slowing down was such a big step. It was hard.
It is huge, that wait time element. And I think I've talked with my husband about how much harder wait time can be in this virtual space, right? And how teachers had to manage doing that with multiple students at once, teaching virtually, and how much of that body language and um, all of those other cues we really rely on as teachers to know when and how long to give a child to respond, and when to slow down and when to speed up.
Yes, definitely. All this is so important. But again, as teachers, isn't it shocking we don't know this?
It's
Like,
never taught. Yeah.
Never. And so both of us have been in front of students in the classroom without this, and we have children, and we had to figure this out through trial and error. And I'm just learning through these interviews. This is why I'm doing the podcast. It's not just so that I can put information into the world. I'm actually using what I learn from each person for my own benefit in my life with myself and my family to see, what's working and what I can use. So it's implementable
Yeah,
for everyone.
so
Thank you
great.
so much. Thank you for sharing this. Is there anything else that you can think of that gave you something that other people don't have, that something within you?
I think, just kind of instilling that love of learning. I mean, it sounds like we're very connected in that way. And just kind of, for me, just being kind of a literacy geek because someone said teaching reading is like rocket science, and it really is. And well, it's not rocket science, and there are people that are like, I can teach a kid how to read, well, it can't be that hard, and but the truth is that it really is changing all the time and improving all the time. And what we know from the fMRI scans and what we're learning about the brain is changing and improving all the time. And so I think just that natural curiosity that I have has connected me with so many other colleagues who also have that natural curiosity. And then you connect with each other and share ideas, just like we're doing today. And just having the vulnerability to say, I don't have it all figured out, right? I'm learning too. I'm 43 years old, and I'm learning every day. Wouldn't life be so boring if I wasn't? And I think that gives kids the freedom to say the same and to say, I don't have it all figured out, and that's okay. And I love learning something new, and I love talking to other people about what I've learned. And I mean, I think that's kind of what we all really want our kids to have more than anything.
Yeah, definitely. And don't you think it was a neat switch to Zoom when you're going into your workday now into Zoom, where this is where a lot of the students have been living for years? Like I bet you they could code what the Zoom back end looks like. And so a lot of teachers were struggling. Well, what do we do here? And I know a lot of my teacher friends connected closer to their students by asking them for help in certain situations. Like, what do we do here? And like you said, the vulnerability of saying, I don't know it all. That's what they want to know.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And there is something deeply valuable about allowing a child to be an expert and to teach you, right? And that, yeah, I mean, there have been so many times over this past year during COVID where I was just kind of like, how do I get that reaction thing again? Or what is it that I do? And they're like, you go like this, and and it's watching a child teach you and having them feel that feeling is one of the most important things that we can do for them.
I love that. I love that. And I actually remember when I had to move my programs online. It was around 2014. And this was back when we had to code websites. So I actually had hired a high school student out of Chicago. His name was Austin Walsh, and he would be in class, and I called him, and he was the best. He was helping like a lot of the motivational speakers I was working with, like Les Brown. He was helping them, Mark Victor Hansen, to move their stuff online. So I thought, oh, hey, can you help me? And he was like, yeah, I just got to finish history class. And I'm like, well, how old are you? He was 16 at the time. And it was just amazing. I loved working with Austin. It was the best experience. But can you share how the pandemic and your health caused you to take everything that you were doing one-on-one to an online model, and how you did it for those people that might be thinking about it?
Yeah, for sure. I think, well, first of all, I think it happened overnight, right? And it was crazy. And so it is interesting to see how differently people kind of react to an emergency situation, right? And So I think teachers in that way have always been really great about sharing, and sharing is caring. And so I think that was kind of like the beginning of me to kind of, really, my husband set me up with LinkedIn, and I started becoming more active there and started realizing that there are people everywhere that are fighting the good fight. And in a way, it allowed me to feel more connected to my professional world. In Vermont, we're kind of resource limited, and but as getting back to the point, switching to Zoom was crazy and fast, and thank God I was able to find people where we could share ideas and make suggestions, and because it was exhausting, and I think any teacher can understand what this last year was like, and I think the stories are common. And I would have like a 13-hour day of teaching virtual, and Zoom fatigue is real. And I can remember I would just have like the energy just enough to have my husband put a meal in front of me, sit with my family at the table, have 30 minutes of a conversation. And I was going to bed at like 7:30 at night. So, but really, what happened for me during COVID is that at the end of January, I had a pretty severe concussion because I was working 13-hour days and trying to fit in a ski. And I had to stop abruptly with my one-on-one, the virtual. And it was a really scary and difficult time, but it also gave me the time and space to just really kind of reimagine what we have kind of always assumed school to be, and allowed me to have the time to connect with more of the people that are really just doing really amazing work in the field of education, and specifically the field of dyslexia, and how we really need to be doing more for these kids. And there was just kind of like this, I feel like, and I hope that we're in the midst of a really big movement of all of us coming together, and instead of doing all of these diluted separate fights, of really banding together and supporting these kids better.
That's exactly why when we spoke through LinkedIn that I thought, the more that I got to know your story, I thought this is the perfect place to showcase what you're doing, because people all over the world could benefit from the fact that you had a head injury, but you still launched this and got things going, in the most difficult time. That's, let alone the fact of what you're doing with the students. It was personally and professionally, you got this going. And so when I met you, which I'm glad you're on LinkedIn, because that's where you can connect to people all over the place, not just the US, but it brings everyone so tightly knit, and everyone's so professional on that platform. I just love connecting with people in this space all over the world. I think that'll be a great place as well. But I wanted to ask, how does your program actually work? So do you work with students outside of Vermont because you're online? Could you host people from, let's say, the UK, internationally, Canada? How does it work?
Yeah, I mean, like that part of it is really cool. I was just doing a Zoom call with someone in the UK who's helping my son, who has dyslexia, with a new writing tool that he's developed. And I think that's part of what is so cool about how we're looking at learning now. And don't get me wrong, like I fully was so ready for my kids to go back to in person, and my kids, who are teenage boys, my husband and I never thought we would be raising boys at that age saying, I can't wait to go back to school. I want to go to school. But like they were so fed up with virtual. But I do think that once students are more in person again, that 1 hour a week or 1 hour or 2 hours a month virtually is going to be more accessible for them. So, we like I said, we don't have specialized schools for kids with dyslexia in Vermont. We really don't in a lot of places. And so we just have limited resources. So finding my tribe and my people was tricky. And I kind of felt like I was spending 20 years going, dyslexia is real. It's a real thing. We're talking 1 in 5.
Right.
And just kind of like screaming into the void. And now I Can Read has instructors in Vancouver. We have instructors in New Jersey, and and they're expert instructors, and I think that's kind of like something I've always had to contend with professionally is, tons and tons of people entering the profession and saying, I'm a tutor, I can do this, I can tutor your child in reading and writing. And, so many families would come to me after wasting so many years and money on, instruction that just wasn't, having any gains, and kids weren't getting anywhere. So yeah, I think, the dream and what's happening is that kids are joining from all over the place, and we have instructors that are all over the place. And even though we're virtual, it's really pretty incredible that over this past year, we saw similar gains that we saw in the previous 19 years. So as long as the instruction is effective, and it is research based, and the instructor knows what they're doing, but they're also able to make that connection and that relationship with kids that we were just talking about virtually, it is possible, and there's just so much more flexibility now with being able to access these services that are so needed.
And when we were speaking before, we were talking a little bit about how students who are struggling to read also have need in social and emotional skills. So when we were talking and you were mentioning that's a huge component of your program, I was just thrilled to hear that. Can you just share how you're incorporating social and emotional learning into your Learn to Read programs?
Yeah, so I think I'm so glad to hear that social emotional learning is finding more of a place, and there's more fidelity to the need for it. But it's always been a part of what I do, and I think, um, you know, I really don't think parents understand how challenging it is for their kids, and parents have always been more than willing to drop their kids off and pay someone to teach their kid how to read, right? Like most parents understand how valuable literacy is for their child and for their adulthood. I don't think parents understand the shame and the isolation that these kids are feeling on a daily basis. And it could be that with the increased skills, these kids start to show more confidence, and they start to show, the things that we kind of wanted our kids to show all along. But I think so many of our kids are super stealth, and they keep their struggles hidden. Mm-hmm. And as a result of that, there's just, there is so much shame that comes along with how they're feeling, and they're in an environment that is, causing them to feel shame and causing them to feel like they're the only one that is feeling this way. And I think just working with a child one-on-one, you start to realize that, things will come up like, yeah, sometimes I just pretend like I'm reading the book, or yeah, how, and it sometimes I would, I don't know that he really likes this, but sometimes I would just make I would make up stories about my son Brendan, to just take that the pressure off of them, and just say, sometimes he has teachers that call on him like in the middle of class, and he had no idea they were going to call on him, and he would talk about like how stressful that felt for him and how awful that felt for him. And then all of a sudden they would start giving you their own stories. And I think no matter what you're doing, you have to meet a child where they're at now.
Right.
And a lot of us don't really know where they're at now. A lot of us don't know how truly negative that self-talk is that they are playing over and over and over in their heads. And that's kind of how I Readify Learning was born, because I was doing a deep dive into Brene Brown, and she is like the expert on shame. And everything she was saying just resonated with me so deeply. And I was like, God, she talks about armor, and she talks about, the guards that we put up to protect ourselves. And every time I would listen to her book, because I read with my ears, just like I ask my students to. And she would talk about armor, and I would think, God, there's nobody in the world that has more armor than a middle schooler or a child who is in school and is not doing what their peers are doing because they can't. And they think that they're stupid. They think that something's wrong with them. But mom and dad don't really know that. They don't really know what's happening. They just know that they have a kid that, doesn't like school that much, but they find success on the soccer field, or they love to horseback ride, or they find therapists to help them deal with their confidence or their anxiety or their depression. But being a being a parent of a child with dyslexia, I mean, I know that they're not fine. Like, I've listened to kids tell me their stories over and over and over again, and they're all the same. These are kids that are feeling like they're the only ones. These are the kids that are falling through the cracks, and they are super stealth, and they are just so good at staying hidden. And they have wildly inaccurate stories that they're telling themselves about, that they're stupid, that there's something wrong with them. But what they need to be replaying and they need to be hearing, is that it's actually a gift. That dyslexia, whether you have dyslexia, whether it's diagnosed, whether it's not, whether it's reading is just hard, there's a lot of gifts that come along with that. And it's actually a sign of genius, and it really is. And I think, God, how are we not teaching these kids this? Because, you talk about LinkedIn, like you talk about entrepreneurs, and you talk about people that just create something that we don't have yet because we need it. And oh my God, how did I live without that? That's these kids. And we don't talk about the 40% of kids with dyslexia that grow up to be our CEOs and our entrepreneurs and our future leaders, or the 40% of them that are the world's millionaires or billionaires. Like, these are the kids that need these leadership skills. And that's why I started Readify Learning, because there really is nothing for those kids, and they learn how to read and write. They get all the structured literacy that they need, but there's nobody that's really giving them those next level steps of, okay, guess what? You're going to have to write like a lot of essays to get through school, and it's really important that you learn how to express yourself, whether it's through oral or written communication. And, I just started to like imagine being able to do these next level skills in a group of kids and with families where we're all doing the same thing. And you're not asking a child to read with your ears when everyone else in the classroom is using their eyes. All of a sudden we're doing it as a community, and we're practicing the tools that we're going to need. So yeah, back to your original question, which I think was about social emotional learning. I think, the only way that we can really get out of those places of shame and isolation is through connection, right? And through others, and
that we self-awareness too, right? Because for them to be aware that it's a gift. This is a whole new paradigm shift for them to be like, it's not, there's nothing to be ashamed of, that you need a different way of learning how to read.
Yeah. And it's us that have it wrong. It's systems that have it wrong. Like, it's us that haven't been trained well, you know, and, but it's also us that we know what works. We just have to get you access to those things that work.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing. So what is your vision for where you'd like to see this going? Like, I love the fact that you're international, because that just makes my heart sing, the fact that you're helping kids all over the place. So what's your vision for this?
It makes my heart sing too, because as I said, my husband and I didn't say this, but we met in Chicago, and through the volunteer program, and one of the hardest parts of us moving back to Vermont was diversity, and the lack of diversity, the various shades of white that we have in our state, and raising children in that environment. And so I think that was part of what excites me the most too, is that we do have access to people all over the world, and people that don't look like us, and people that don't think like us. But I love that piece of it too, that it is worldwide. And I love that I have appointments like yours that are going into my calendar, that I have to check time zones and make sure that the time zones are aligning. But yeah, so we decided to name Readify because of the word defy. And, I just think that there is so much bravery with all of the students that I've worked with. And there's a lot of bravery that comes with acknowledging that you need help. And so then we decided to call our one-on-one program Intensify, because that's the intensive instruction that's needed. But I think for me, the next 3 to 5 years is I want to see Now I Can Read grow as much as possible. And I just grew tired of fighting systems and, kind of helping kids stay afloat. I think, I just decided, why are we doing this? Why don't we just make something better, make something that our kids don't have yet? And I can see the Now I Can Read and the Readify serving adults in the next 3 to 5 years. I'm a member of a lot of Facebook groups for parents of children with dyslexia and adults who have dyslexia or think they might have dyslexia but never got diagnosed. And I think there's just a lot of sad stories, but they're all common stories. And I think it's really inspiring to flip that script and to talk about all of the strengths that this community has, and how we can really be teaching these gifts super young, and over and over and over again, so that we're beating the script of the negative talk that's happening, whether you're 10 years old or 50. And I love the movement that's happening. I think that like I said, there's just a lot of people that are doing really amazing work. And I think the more we can band together with a common vision and a common goal, the more awareness we're going to spread, and the more lives we're going to change.
Love it. I love what you're doing over there. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. For people who want to learn more, is the best way to go to your website, ReaDefyLearning.com? Is that the best?
Yes. And so that was kind of like part of the problem too, is that I realized my cousin Keela Gendron, she and I had been like bouncing back ideas of like the name for a long time. And she helped me design my website as well. And she actually came up with the name Readify. And it was like, it was like 2 a.m. and she's in Colorado and I'm in Massachusetts, and we're going back and forth. And I was like, oh my God, I love it. I love the idea of defying what we think learning is. And so yeah, but the problem is that Readify is really difficult to spell. And I don't know how how are you going to spell that? You look that up. So Yes, you can go to Readify Learning, but you can also go to nowicanread.com. And I think Now I Can Read is a lot easier to find. And that is, kind of the umbrella company to the two services and products that it offers.
Well, I understand that very well. All the years brainstorming achieveit360.com, and then people think it's achieve IT, and so they're achieving technical skills, and I'm
Yeah,
thinking, no,
yeah,
that was like a year of brainstorming. So I understand the whole thing, and it's great that you can redirect websites, because I have a few websites over the years that redirect to Achieve It 360. But so readefylearning.com or nowicanread.com is the same place, and I've put all that in the show notes as well. It is the best next step someone who wants to speak with you go to the book a consultation page? Is that the best?
yeah. And I also, in my time off, wrote an ebook. Basically, the very long title is I'm worried my child has dyslexia. What now? But really, it's like we talked about. I think there's a lot of shame with the word dyslexia, and it's unfortunate. And I'm hoping that we're going to be changing that narrative very soon. But yeah, it's just it gives a breakdown of different age levels of different kind of warning signs and what to do next and what I would do as a parent, what I did as a parent. So if you go to the main website, you'll get a free ebook if you just pop in your email, and that can be a good way to connect to, and you'll get a copy of that ebook. That I think it's really important to share as much information as possible. That's really expert information, because I as a parent, you want what's best for your child, and you want to fix things that you think are broken. And I remember my son looking at me and saying, "I'm not broken." And it was so powerful. And I said, "You know what, Brennan, you're absolutely not broken. You are amazing. You are genius." And but that's not to say that we don't need to get you the right tools and the right instruction to make sure that you feel successful in our literate world. So yeah, you can click and get a free copy of that ebook, and that can be a good first step too for parents that are kind of wondering, or teachers who are worried about not reaching all of their kids like I was feeling in my beginning days.
Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing all that you've done. It's phenomenal, the work you've put in the past 20 years. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, sharing your ideas. Do you have any final thoughts to close out with? If there's parents or teachers and they're just thinking, is this for me? What kind of final thoughts would you have?
I think my final thought would be, and I'm a wordy person, so I haven't really thought about it until now, but I think I would just say, stop waiting, and stop saying wait it out. I think the whole idea of Leo's a late bloomer is archaic, and it is ineffective, and it leads to really sad outcomes. And so if you're worried and you think something's up, your intuition is usually right. And, get help. You start digging, stop listening to people that are telling you to wait it out, because that teacher probably doesn't know. And you probably don't know, because it's not your training, it's not your background. But if your instinct is that, something's not quite right, you're probably correct.
That's really good advice, because I always thought wait it out, that maybe the brain isn't developed yet, that we need to just wait it out. But you're absolutely right. When something is telling you inside, no, there's something, and it's going into math problems, because the literacy does affect different subject areas. So catching it as soon as possible, especially we know the statistics by third grade. So I think, if you haven't caught it by third grade.
You're right. And I think we don't, I think we don't catch it early enough. We just don't. And what is it? I think it's over 90% of kids that are reading well in first grade will for life.
Wow.
And it's never too late. That's not to say it's too late, but it's just so much easier. Dyslexia is so much easier. All of these issues are so much easier to remediate the earlier you start.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for all of these resources.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you coming on and sharing. Looking forward to supporting you throughout your whole career, whatever you choose to do, whatever move you make with this field. Thanks so much.
Same. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.